Thank you very much for that wonderful welcome, and thank you for all that you do, all of you, for the party in the South East. I'm trying to make sure I attend every regional conference, either last year or this year. I couldn't get you last year, so I'm delighted to be here this year. And later on today, I'm sure I can carry your greetings to the London Labour Party conference being held this afternoon at Congress House. And yesterday we were in Manchester campaigning with Andy Burnham and holding a fascinating round table of people with disabilities to help build our policies towards people with disabilities. So the idea being that we get advice, ideas, information and policy proposals from those most affected by what this Tory government has done and what the Lib Dem Tory coalition did over the past 5 years, so that we do build up our policies with popular support and the expertise of people who are most affected by them. That is the best way forward for our party. I'm sure you would agree. And can I thank Annalise very much for the introduction she's just given, but also for the phenomenal amount of work that she does as our MEP. Wherever I go, Annalise seems to be there. Go to Brussels, meetings there, she's there. Go to Witney, she's there. Come here, she's here. And so many other places. She's absolutely fantastic Labour representative for the southeast of England. So, Annalise, thank you for everything you do. And I made it very clear to our EPLP colleagues at the last meeting I was at with them that whatever the outcome of this whole process, they are working flat out to defend the interests of the worst off and hardest up within our society, and ensuring that our future relationship with our socialist colleagues all across Europe remains as strong after we leave the EU as it is as part of the EU. And I'm very determined to maintain that very close relationship with all the socialist trade unions and progressive groups all across Europe. That has to be the right internationalist way forward, and that I'm determined to achieve. It's obviously a pleasure to be here in Ashford, but we meet after a global wake-up call on Tuesday's US presidential election. Because whether it's in the United States or the UK, people feel left behind, marginalised by an economic system that makes them work harder for less, whilst hoovering up ever greater rewards for a very small elite on both sides of the Atlantic. People are right to be angry. Our failed economic system is failing living standards and raising inequality, again, on both sides of the Atlantic. Young people today find it ever harder to get a home of their own, harder to find a good, secure job, landed with a lifelong debt simply for trying to get a good standard of university education. Older people see their children and grandchildren struggling, their libraries and community services cut, their friends' social care getting worse. They've seen politicians privatise what once belonged to all of us, and they're paying for it with higher bills and higher fares as a result. So it's up to us, the Labour Party, to step forward and offer real solutions that meet the needs of our time. Then, into the vacuum step the merchants of hate and blame if we don't come up with the solutions people need. They see the problem instead of offering solutions to make people's lives better. They offer always someone to blame. Nigel Farage blames immigrants, yet offers not a single practical proposal to put a penny more into our National Health Service. In fact, UKIP and Farage actually want to privatise our NHS. A service that now relies on many very hard-working migrant workers to keep it going. And we should thank them for the work they do and the commitment they've shown to our public services. The Tories bandied around terms like scrounger and skiver, whipping up divisions against unemployed and people with disabilities. We will never use that language against people who deserve and need support from a real system of social security. That's what the Labour way is. And In the United States, we've had the shocking spectacle of Donald Trump's election campaign, which found an unending list of people to blame. Women, black people, Mexicans, Muslims, military veterans. But there was one bit of social justice yesterday. Mexico beat the US 2-1 at football. Okay, Lara. Everyone except the billionaire class of tax dodgers to which he himself belongs. Of course, they are not to blame for anything. However, it would be wrong of us to not remember that Donald Trump and his campaign did tap into real problems. Stagnating and falling wages, underfunded public services, insecure work and insecure housing, and years of being left behind or neglected in post-industrial America. Ever heard the same story here? Post-industrial Britain, people left behind. In our Britain, nobody will ever be left behind. That is not our way of doing things. And that deep frustration that is there as people look to their children's future and see problems ahead, problems of work, problems of education, problems of housing. And there is deep anger at a political elite that doesn't listen. But instead of offering real solutions or the resources to make them work, he offered only someone to blame. Everyone, that is, apart from those actually responsible for the broken economy or the failed political system. That's Trump in his election campaign in the USA. Now across the Atlantic to here. The Tories do exactly the same. They've opened the door to UKIP and fanned the flames of fear. As for the Tories, Theresa May, as Home Secretary, fed the idea that immigration was the real problem, made promises she knew she couldn't deliver about slashing numbers. Is there a comrade with a glass of water? Oh, thank you. The comrade has arrived. Thank you. And she whipped up hate with those notorious go-home vans. No wonder she didn't even temper her welcome to Donald Trump. She has used the same strategy herself, if delivered with a more refined voice. We have no idea how Donald Trump proposes, or as is said, to make America great again. And Theresa May's Tories offer slogans, but not solutions for most people in Britain. We won't tackle the damage done by elite globalization just by leaving the European Union. We won't take back control unless we take on the corporate vested interests that control our energy, our transport, and are very deeply infiltrating all of our public services. One thing is for sure, neither billionaire Donald Trump nor the billionaire-backed Tories have any interest in giving people back real control or reining in the predatory excesses of a globalized free-for-all. But Labour exists to search for real solutions to the problems and failures that Trump and the Tories are unable to address. Solutions that deal with inequality and injustice in our society. Let me start with housing. House prices are 40% higher in this region, the southeast, than in the country as a whole. You're all, I'm sure, very, very well aware of that. And that has a knock-on effect on excessive rents as well in the private rented sector. The housing market has become a plaything of investment opportunities for a few, not about homes for the many. The Tories have had 6 years of failure on housing, and it has hit the working class people of the southeast very hard indeed. Home ownership has fallen, house building is 50,000 lower, homelessness has risen every year that the Tories have been in power, and families are being forced into overpriced, poor quality, unregulated private sector rents, and increasingly forced out of this region because of the cost of living. Take, for example, Thanet, council house waiting list 1,433. Thanet has just over 3,000 council properties. Do the maths. 1,400 on the waiting list, only 3,000 properties actually owned by the local authorities. So, Labour will allow councils to borrow to build council housing again. And we will suspend right to buy so that when that housing is built, it stays in the public sector. And we will invest in genuinely affordable homes to buy, rent or for shared ownership. We put forward a plan to invest in building housing and to create skilled jobs in the construction sector and to meet higher standards of energy efficiency, benefiting the occupants and the environment. The worst standards of energy efficiency are always found in the private rented sector. Better standards are often found in home ownership and in local authority places or housing association places. Result, high bills for those in the private rented sector, often the poorest people who can least afford it. We need regulation to give people lower bills, warmer homes and a better environment for their children. It's all quite simple and it creates jobs in the process. So that will be part of the regulations we'll put forward for the private rented sector, and also to ensure that homes are fit for human habitation and that rents are regulated. When we proposed an amendment, Theresa Pearce proposed an amendment to the housing bill when it was going through Parliament, quite simply just to say nothing should ever be put on the market unless it was fit for human habitation. The Tories voted it down. I mean, how hard is it to say nothing should be put on the market unless it's fit for human habitation? It's not complicated. They turned it down. That is a measure of their disdain for people going through a hardship. On the issues of regeneration, there are many areas that have been neglected for too long. For the year to June 2016, again, in Thanet, unemployment was 6.9%, which is significantly higher than both the South East average of 4.1% and Britain as a whole of 5.1%. This region has been starved of the investment it needs by a conservative ideology that says the government's only job is to step back and let the market take care of it. Well, that has failed. So through a regional investment bank for the South East, part of our National Investment Bank strategy, we will be putting forward £30 billion of investment in this region. That will be targeted at creating good, sustainable jobs, high-skilled, well-paid and secure. We will invest in developing industries in sustainable technology. Especially in this county, we need to restore pride and prosperity to many of the coastal towns that have been left behind. Where the Tories neglect, Labour will invest. That is our way of doing things. Small businesses in the South East have nearly 20% of national turnover, yet they received only 13% of bank lending. Again, a regional investment bank must ensure that those businesses who pay their taxes and respect their workers have access to the finance they need to secure their future to grow. We're not going to use public money to subsidise dirty, groundwater, polluting, landscape scarring industries like fracking. We're going to invest in high-quality, sustainable jobs. So we will invest in the transition to a low-carbon economy, not clinging on to polluting technologies that we can consign to history by harnessing the technological advances that have been made with public investment. And that investment delivers a return for everybody. A stronger economy, better jobs with higher incomes that produce more tax revenue to better fund public services in the future. We have huge natural resources in Britain. A world-beating history of scientific research and technological development, including in many of our institutions of academic and scientific excellence in this region. But as a country, we lag behind the rest of the world's major economies in generating energy from renewable resources. We lag behind on the speed of our broadband. We lag behind on our transport infrastructure also. Nowhere is that more true than on our railways. To those who commute on Southern Rail, I offer you this pledge. Labour will bring railways into public control and remove the incompetent privateers who have leached public investment and given us the highest fares in Europe and turned them into directors' bonuses and shareholders' payouts. We are going to run things very differently. Andy MacDonald, who's our Shadow Transport Secretary, has been campaigning with you across the whole Southern Rail network. And I know things aren't much better on South East or South West either. That's why the next Labour government will take back control from the privateers and put control in the hands of passengers, commuters and democratically elected politicians. We will invest in rail, invest in on-board broadband as well, and that will help us to be able to cut fares. That is important if we're to get people using our railways. Here in Ashford, you know the benefits of high-speed rail and good rail connections. But you also know when you get off a train in Ashford and take the Marsh line down to Hastings, it is stepping back an age in many ways. An age on the train, it's a beautiful run, but it is awful slow. We could be improving all of our branch lines as well. I see investment in the main lines as important, but also rebuilding our branch line infrastructure to feed into that network, so we have even greater use of railways in the future. Cuts pollution, cuts congestion, enables people to have better journeys and a better journey experience. That surely is something that I think a lot of people all over the South East would welcome. That is the Labour offer to people of this region. The National Health Service is Labour's proudest creation. Healthcare free at the point of use as a human right. What an amazing achievement by a Labour government after the Second World War. Turning their back on the misery and the means testing of the 1930s to the principle that the whole society provided healthcare for all. I represented NHS workers as a union organiser, and I have the utmost respect for them. Their utter dedication to their patients and the service as a whole, and their pride in our National Health Service. And we are forever proud of our National Health Service, and we will always defend it. But under the Tories, the NHS is in crisis like it's never been before. We know that a flu epidemic or norovirus can lead to a winter crisis. But the Tories have put the NHS into crisis in spring, summer and autumn also. Waiting lists have never been longer, deficits have never been larger, and they are growing. More people are waiting longer in pain for an operation. More people are waiting longer, often in severe pain, at A&E departments as hard-pressed staff struggle to cope with the numbers of people coming in. Over £4 billion of cuts to adult social care inflicted under the Tories have left hundreds of thousands of people without the care package they need. Thousands more with minimal 15-minute visits, and more elderly people turning up to A&E due to neglect and not safe to be discharged home because the support is no longer there. We cannot allow this situation to continue. This is an unprecedented crisis in A&Es as well as in social care. Unprecedented pressure on our National Health Service. You'd have thought a government would come up with a sensible solution to this. So what's the Tory solution? They spent £3 billion on top-down reorganisation of the NHS. They privatised services like ambulances in Sussex, and that privatisation has failed. Our great friend Ken Loach has quite rightly led protests on Thursday and yesterday against a £700 million privatisation of NHS services in Bath in Somerset. Our excellent Shadow Health Secretary, John Ashworth, has already condemned this, and I'm sure you would condemn it as well. They're threatening now, later this month, a new round of A&E closures and downgrades. That's why we are determined to bring all NHS services back into the family of NHS provision. That is our way forward. And that's why we're focusing our National Campaign Day on Saturday, the 26th of November, 2 weeks' time, on defending our NHS. I want every one of you here, every constituency Labour Party in the country, out in the community that day and the days that follow, campaigning to defend our National Health Service and to highlight the damage that the Tories have done. Our National Health Service, free at the point of use, with parity of esteem for mental health services that have suffered so grotesquely. And integration of social care That's the very core of the vision of the kind of society that we want to live in. I want all of you, constituency Labour Party officers, councillors, trade unionists, party members, to work together to get as many of our members out on the streets on the 26th of November. When we did a campaigning day in September, we got 400 events all over the country organised at 4 or 5 days' notice. We've got a bit more notice this time. Do your best. Get that message out there. The Labour Party is totally committed to a National Health Service, free at the point of use, properly funded, with staff properly employed, not a service to be broken up, diced up, carved up and privatised, which is all that the Tories, UKIP and all the right are offering in our society. Now, we don't, as a party, have the benevolence of many press barons. You may have noticed that. And we don't have donations from oligarchs. You've probably noticed that as well. But we have something better. We have something much more powerful. We have ourselves. We have each other. We have our commitment. We have our principles. And there are now more than 500,000 of us who are members of this party. More than every other political party in Britain, with the largest socialist party all across this whole continent. And we have more than 3 million affiliated members through the trade unions. We have now more than 550,000 individual members. And in the South East alone, we have more members than either the Lib Dems, Greens or UKIP have in the entire country. Think about how strong we are. Our membership is our most valuable resource. If we organise it, then our ability to speak to voters, stand candidates, lead campaigns in our communities, that ability is absolutely second to none. And working together, we can expose their failures in the economy, their failures on housing, their shambolic Brexit from the European Union, and their failed privatisation of our railways. Working together, we can get more Labour councillors elected in the council elections next year, and a Labour government to rebuild and transform this country so that no one, absolutely no one, and no community is ever left behind. That is the Labour message. Thank you very much.